The Little Bookroom by Eleanor Farjeon. The King and the Corn. There was in the village a simpleton who was not the ordinary type of village idiot by any means. He was the schoolmaster's son and had been one of those precocious children of whom everything or nothing may be hoped. His father hoped everything and forced him to live in his books, and when the child had reached the age of 10, saw the end of his hopes. It was not that the boy's bright wits turned dull, he lost them altogether. Well, but did he? He sat in the fields, smiling a great deal and talking seldom, until some chance loosed his tongue. Then he talked without pause, till he came to his stop, like an old musical box that everybody thinks is out of order, and, unexpectedly kicked, plays out its tune. One never knew what chance kick would set Simple Willie going. In books he took no more interest at all. Sometimes his father put under his eyes one that had been his delight, but he glanced indifferently at the old tales and records, wandered away, and picked up the daily paper. He generally dropped it very soon, but occasionally his eye seemed chained by a paragraph, usually of a trifling character, and he would stare at it for an hour. His father hated the name his boy had been given by the villagers, but it was spoken with affection, and Simple Willie was even pointed out to visitors with pride. He was singularly beautiful, tawny-haired, fair-skinned, gold-dusted with freckles, with blue eyes sly and innocent like a child's, and fine-cut lips which smiled with unusual charm. He was 16 or 17 when he was first pointed out to me. I was spending the month of August in the village. For a fortnight he only replied to my greeting with a smile, but one day, as I lay at the edge of a cornfield, 3 parts cut, and drowsily watched the center patch diminish, Simple Willie strolled up and lay beside me. Without looking at me, he reached out his hand and fingered the scarab I wear on my watch chain. Suddenly he began to speak. When I was a boy in Egypt, I sowed my father's corn. When it was sown, I used to watch the field until the green blades began to grow, and then, as the days went by, I saw them turn from grass to grain, and the field from a green field to a gold one. And every year, when the field was gold with corn, I thought my father had the richest treasure in all Egypt. There was at that time a king in Egypt who had many names. The shortest of his names was Ra, so that is what I will call him. King Ra lived in the city in great splendor. My father's field was outside the city, and I had never seen the king, but men told tales of his palace, and his rich clothes, his crown and his jewels, and his coffers full of money. He ate off silver plates, and drank from cups of gold, and slept under curtains of purple silk fringed with pearls. I liked to listen when men talked of Ra, because he sounded like a fairy king, but I could not believe he was a real man like my father, or that his gold mantle was as real as our cornfield. One day, when the sun was very hot and my father's field was tall, I lay in the shadow of the corn picking the grains from an ear and eating them one by one. As I did so, I heard a man's laugh over my head, and I looked up and saw the tallest man I had ever beheld, looking down on me. He had a great black beard and curls upon his breast, and his eyes were as fierce as an eagle's. His headdress and his garments glittered in the sun, and I knew he was the king. A little way off I saw his guards on their horses, and one held the bridle of the king's own horse, which he had left when he came to look at me. For a little while we only gazed at each other, he down and I up. Then he laughed again and said, "You look contented, child." "I am Kingaray," said I. "You eat your corn as though it were a feast." "It is Kingaray," said I. "Who are you, child?" "My father's son," I said. "And who is your father?" "The richest man in Egypt." "How do you make that out, child?" "He owns this field," I said. The king cast his bright eye over our field and said, "I own Egypt." I said, "It is too much." "How?" said the king. "Too much. It cannot be too much, and I am a richer man than your father." At this I shook my head. "I say I am. What does your father wear?" "A shirt like mine." I touched my cotton shirt. "See what I wear." The king swept his gold mantle round him so that it stung my cheek. "Now do you say your father is richer than I am?" "He has more gold than that," I said. "He has this field." The king looked dark and angry. "How if I burn this field?" "What will he have then?" "The corn again, next year." "The king of Egypt is greater than Egypt's corn," cried King Are. "The king is more golden than the corn. The king will outlast the corn." This did not sound true to me, and I shook my head again. Then a storm seemed to break in King Ra's eyes. He turned to his guards and cried harshly, "Burn this field." And they set fire to the four corners of the field, and as it burned the king said, "Behold your father's gold, child. It has never been so bright before and will never be bright again." Not till the gold field was black did King Are go away, and as he went he cried, "Which is more golden now, the corn or the king? Are will live longer than your father's corn." He mounted his horse, and I saw him go, his golden mantle blazing in the sun. My father crept out of his hut and whispered, "We are ruined people. Why did King Are burn our field?" I could not tell him, for I did not know. I went to the little garden behind the hut and wept. When I opened my hand to wipe the tears away, I saw the half-empty ear of ripe grain stuck to my palm. It was the very last of our treasure, half an ear of corn, all that remained of thousands of golden ears, and lest the king should want to take it too, I stuck my finger in the earth, making holes, and into the bottom of each hole I dropped a grain. Next year, when the corn of Egypt ripened, 10 lovely ears stood in my garden among the flowers and gourds. That summer the king died and was to be buried with great pomp. It was the custom for kings of Egypt to lie in a sealed chamber filled with jewels, rich robes, and golden furniture of all sorts. Among other things, he must have corn, lest he should be hungry before he arrived in heaven. A man came out of the city to fetch the corn, and he passed our hut, going and coming. The day was hot, and on the way back he came into us to rest a while, and told us that the sheaf of corn he carried would be buried with the king. Soon he fell asleep from heat and fatigue, and while he slept his words rang in my head. I seemed to see King Are again, standing above me, saying, "The king of Egypt is more golden than the corn. The king of Egypt will outlast the corn." And I ran out quickly to my garden and cut down my 10 ears and thrust the golden blades among the corn the sleeping man had gathered for the king. When he awoke, he took up the sheaf and went on his way to the city. And when King Ra was buried in his glory, they buried my corn with him. Simple Willie stroked my scarab softly. Is that all, Willie? I asked. Not all, said Willie. Hundreds and hundreds of years afterwards, last year indeed it was, some Englishmen in Egypt found King Ra's tomb, and when they opened it, there, among the treasures, lay my corn. The golden stuffs crumbled in the light of day, but not my corn. These Englishmen brought some of it to England, and passed my father's house and stopped to rest a while, as the Egyptian had done so long ago. They told my father what they had with them, and showed it to him. I handled it for myself, my very corn. Willie smiled at me, his radiant smile. One grain stuck to my palm. I sowed it in the middle of this field. Then, if it grew, I said, it must be in that little uncut patch. I looked at the cutter, making its last revolution. Willie rose, beckoning me to follow. We looked carefully over the small remaining patch, and in a moment he pointed to an ear of corn which seemed taller and brighter than the rest. Is this the one? I asked. He smiled at me, like a sly child. It's certainly more golden than its fellows, I said. Yes, said Simple Willie. How gold's the king of Egypt,